second innings. The picture which comes to our mind is sitting in our balcony or garden or backyard, enjoying your morning tea or coffee with your favorite book or a newspaper. No hustle bustle, no rush, no boardroom meetings, no more PPTs. Knock knock, this is 2024 and the motto now is retired, not tired. Pause and restart. But how? Namaste, I'm Shubhi Mathur and I welcome you all to yet another episode of Let Us Talk. Today we have with us Mr. Rajiv Gurnani. Rajiv has worked in the banking industry for more than 30 years. He headed the credit division of Kotak Mahindra Bank, and then 2 years back, he took voluntary retirement. Welcome, Rajiv. Welcome on Let Us Talk.
Thanks, Shubhi. Thanks to being on your talk show, and I look forward to having an interesting conversation. Thanks a lot.
So, Rajiv, in our last week's video, our speaker highlighted very briefly that the importance of planning your retirement in advance, be it financially, spiritually, mentally, physically. And one thing which got me to have you on our channel was that you were heading the credit division of Kotak Bank. You were enjoying a very reputed post there, and you took voluntary retirement. In a time when people look for extension, you chose to take voluntary retirement. So, what made you take this decision, and what factors did you consider while choosing to take voluntary retirement?
Yeah, so Shubhi, basically, I think there are various, I would say, phases of life that one goes through. Okay, obviously, when you start your career, you look for, ensuring that you get into a good position, you progress in your career, and obviously, you want to earn sufficient money and, and do well in life, obviously. And I think from that point of view, I was fairly lucky that, I got into a company where I stuck on for almost 30 years, which was Kotak Mahindra Bank. Having said that, obviously, a lot of people do ask me why I spent such a long time in one single job. However, the way I look at it, while I was in one single company, I actually, had 4 different jobs or roles that I performed. So from that point of view, I never felt that I was ever in a position where I felt bored. It was always an exciting journey for me throughout those 30 years, and that kept me alive. When I joined Kotak, of course, it was a very young organization. It was just 7-8 years old in terms of its existence. So I grew along with the organization, and that kept me going. Okay.
Yeah.
But then a phase came when I found that I was missing out something in terms of trying to do something more than what my job entails. Okay, or let me put it this way: in trying to gain I would say understanding of some other areas which may not necessarily be related to the role that I was performing or the job which I was performing. And that set in motion a thought in me that maybe I should look out for a change. And when I say a change, not necessarily a change in job, but a change in doing something totally different. And that thought crept in me about 2 years before I finally left. I left about 2 years back. So 2 years prior to that, this thought crept into me. And of course, I think the fact that COVID also came around at that point of time in 2020 kind of accelerated my thinking that, I think I should call it a day and, maybe do something which is more into what I really want to do rather than doing something just for the purpose of earning actually. So that's when and of course, a couple of things happened which kind of accelerated that decision. I kind of overnight decided that I'll leave my job. So that is how it goes actually.
So Rajiv, first thing which will come to the mind is that you must have prepared or you must have secured yourself very well financially when you took this decision, and especially during COVID times. So were you financially prepared to take this big leap?
Yeah. So obviously, I think anyone who is planning to take a premature retirement, which I did, I had 4 years to go when I finally decided to leave the company. So obviously, that was an important factor. Having said that, obviously, each individual, needs to define what is enough or sufficient for a person. So, everyone has its own criteria in terms of deciding that, okay, I think I have secured myself financially, not only for myself but even for my family, and that
Yeah.
therefore there is no, what shall I say, financial requirement for me to work. Okay, you may still do something after your retirement, which may be considered as a kind of a second innings, and do something which will entail that you keep earning some amount, but that obviously is not your main criteria.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I think I was fairly fortunate that I had kind of, I would say, to the extent that whatever I had defined in terms of my requirement, I had secured myself financially, and I thought therefore that maybe I should call it a day, and that kind of obviously helped me in taking that decision. Otherwise, it's not an
Yeah.
easy decision for a lot of people to take, and obviously
Yeah.
when you leave your career at the stage at which I left, you're actually at the peak of your earning.
So when does this awakening happen that, okay, start building your portfolio? Any advice you have for the younger generation?
So, when I look around actually, and, in terms of even when I used to recruit the youngsters, and now, of course, I have my own two sons and I see them, at the beginning of their careers, a general observation that I, in fact, find is that, there is a lot of, I think when we started our careers, we were very, very conscious about the fact that we needed to save, we needed to
Yeah.
buy a house and build up our own savings and wealth, etc., etc. Which, in fact, I find nowadays has gone down quite a bit amongst the youngsters. So to that extent, I would say that the younger generation is more prone to spending what they earn much more than what used to happen in my times, at least. And having said that, I think obviously it is an important thing that the earlier you start, and obviously everyone has heard about this concept of compounding, that the earlier you start, you can kind of compound your wealth or your savings at a far higher and a far better rate than even if you start maybe 3, 4, 5 years later. Okay.
Yeah.
So to that extent, my advice would be that I think it is important to have a discipline. I think obviously with a lot of consumerism which has set in, the needs of people have gone up, but I think that needs to be moderated with some amount of discipline, which I think requires to be much more than what I am observing in general with the youngsters today.
Rajiv, the motto of our channel is reinvent yourself, retired but not tired. So, after your voluntary retirement, any new things which you took up, any new hobbies you started, or any new activities which you never did before? How is the life post retirement?
Yeah, so Shubhi, again, like as I said, when I decided to put in my papers, it was almost an overnight decision, though the thought had been hanging there behind my mind for for a couple of years. But when the actual time came, it was like I actually took that decision overnight. My broad thought process, even at the time, was that I wanted to do some things which were kind of related to what I had been doing in terms of my background in finance. So, like you mentioned earlier, I was heading the credit at Kotak Mahindra Bank. Having said that, I had never really, done equity investments, because as a part of a bank, most of the professionals are not permitted to buy and sell shares freely, and therefore most of the equity investments that I used to do was through the mutual fund routes and was never directly into stock market investments. So there was no kind of investment analysis that I used to do for my own investments, and I used to always route it through mutual funds. So this was something which I always had an inclination towards, and I kind of took it up very diligently after I retired. In fact, the day I retired, the very next day I enrolled for, doing a technical course. In fact, I did two
Wow.
technical courses in equity investments. My
Wow.
background had always been in terms of fundamental analysis, because I was used to, understanding companies, understanding their business, and knowing about their balance sheets, etc. But I had never got into technical analysis of, investment. So that was something which I did immediately on my retirement. So that was one thing. Apart from that, of course, I always used to be a very, very voracious reader when I was, when I was young, and I'm talking about my college days and all that. And that is something which I had lost out on during my, job years, because you never got the time to read. So I'm trying to again inculcate that habit of reading much more, and reading not necessarily about financial stuff, which I'm obviously interested in. So I do get into a lot of, I do read a lot of books on economics and economy and etc. But I've also got into reading things about, let's say the Indian culture, for instance. Okay, so I read the Mahabharata, which I always had dreamt of reading. I'm right now reading the Gita, and I'm extremely interested in, whatever
Yeah.
little I've started exploring that. Yeah.
So, Rajiv, during professional lives, people always say, time management, prioritize your personal and professional life. But realistically speaking, it is not possible. One really doesn't get time to, take out for themselves or take out time for your hobbies. So, does this awakening has to happen after retirement, or if you choose to take voluntary
So,
retirement?
no, so I agree with, I think, what you're saying. I think it doesn't need to be necessarily after retirement. In fact, during the time that I was working in Kotak Mahindra, I knew about some of the people who were already, exploring other avenues and other areas even
Yeah.
while they were working, and these were pretty senior people as well. So it's not that these people were junior and all that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it is. In fact, one of my colleagues was very much into Vipassana meditation, for instance. Okay,
Yeah.
every year he used to go for 10 days Vipassana without fail. So I started doing this. I've gone for two courses as of now, two 10-day courses, and I've realized the importance and the benefits that you get out of attending this course. So I now regret that, why I did not start this earlier, like my other colleague used to do it while he was in the office. Okay, so it is not necessary that one needs to do it. So there was another person, or again very senior colleague of mine in the bank, who was very much into reading all the Vedic scriptures and the
Scriptures. Hmm.
Gitas and all that. Okay, obviously at that point of time, at least from my point of view, I used to admire these people in terms of how they are able to manage time, and not only doing their job but also managing to take out time for doing some of the other activities. And I wish that maybe some of these things I could have done it even while I was in job. Now, of course, since I have the time, one can do it very leisurely, which may not have been possible at that point of time. But yeah, but I agree with you. I don't think it is necessary that one does it after
Yeah.
retirement. Okay.
Yeah, Rajiv, I agree. There are so many things which we realize later in life. But as they say, sooner the better. The realizations should come early. And on this note, any message do you have for our viewers?
So, should we? I think the one thing which I realized at this stage is that I think while we have heard about it from our elders and we keep reading about it in various magazines and all that, you finally realize that all that you have done, in terms of your career, in terms of your earning and all that becomes secondary, and you start realizing the importance of keeping yourself fit and healthy, not only physically but also mentally. And from that perspective, I already told you briefly about my inclination towards getting into Vipassana meditation, and I've also in fact joined yoga classes, which kind of helps me to keep my mind balanced and
Balance.
calm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Having said that, I've also become far more conscious now in terms of my physical well-being. So in terms of what I eat, in terms of me exercising or going out for walks, so that I'm physically fit and healthy. Okay, because finally at the end of the day, all your achievements and everything becomes meaningless if you don't have a fit mind and body. So I think
Yeah.
that's the message that I would like to give to everyone. I think that we need to give a lot of importance to keeping yourself fit mentally and healthy, which normally you tend to ignore when you're in your work life, because you're so engrossed in your work that you kind of tend to neglect it, and which I have now realized. So I think Shubhi, the when I actually had put in my papers, it was with some amount of trepidation in terms of how life will be after retirement. A lot of people keep telling you about things like, "Arey, how are you going to spend your time and how will you keep yourself busy and all that." I used to literally work 16 to 18 hours a day. Okay, and I mean, I was that choked up. So obviously that was a worry in my mind as well. But having now experienced life for the last 2 years, I think I've made a very, very good decision. I'm extremely happy with the decision I've taken because I realized that, a lot of things which I could never have dreamt of when I was actually working, I'm now able to do. Some of the things I've already mentioned to you. I think apart from that, what is also important and which we kind of neglect during our day to day life is, being engaged in small things with your friends, with your family, with your relatives, trying to connect up with them, which are things which normally you were ignoring earlier. I mean, I we used to have get-togethers both within the family and within the friend circle, which I invariably used to miss out because I was busy working. Okay, but now I make it a point to attend all those gatherings, all those family functions, whatever it be, and I think that's kind of expanding not only my vision, leanings towards what else is happening in life other than your work-life balance, and also it makes me feel happy in terms of whatever I'm doing. So I think I'm extremely fortunate that I've made that decision. I've got no regrets at all about that.
So, Rajiv, thank you for sharing your journey with us. And thank you for highlighting the fact that earlier the better we start planning our health, wealth, and also our emotional and spiritual quota. So, retirement doesn't mean you have to stop, it simply means pause and restart. Restart with something new. Restart, restart, and reinvent yourself. Thank you, Rajiv, for sharing your journey with us.
Thanks a lot, Shubhi, and I hope I continue to explore newer areas and keep myself feeling more and more excited about the new things that I do. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.